Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcaino. Gabriela Alcaino was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, Chile, to Federico Alcaino and Carolina Donoso Campos. She was their only child and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and was very close to her, just like her grandfather Carlos, who cherished her. Gabriela grew up in a middle-class family that valued education and provided her with a good upbringing, despite not being wealthy. When Gabriela was just 5 years old, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a kind, friendly, and open child who was a bit shy and modest, but she made friends easily and got along with her peers. She had a lovely appearance that earned her admiration and delight from everyone around her. Gabriela excelled in school, loved music, dancing, and drawing, and her parents encouraged her talents. She enjoyed spending time with her younger brothers at her father's house, which was nearby. And overall, her childhood was a happy and carefree time surrounded by loving family members. At 15, Gabriela fell in love for the first time with Fabian, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. They started out as a happy couple, walking hand in hand, eating ice cream and stealing kisses. Fabian came from a good family, and his parents were well respected and wanted the best for him. However, Fabian himself was quiet and secretive, avoiding eye contact and preferring not to talk to others. This led many to assume he was shy, but it's likely he struggled with social anxiety. When Gabriela introduced Fabian to her father, he approved of her choice, seeing Fabian as calm, responsible, and rational. The father had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela and promising not to harm her or let others harm her. Fabian promised to do so. At first, their relationship was loving and calm, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this peace didn't last. After a few months, Fabian's true nature emerged, and he became controlling and cruel. He tried to dictate every aspect of Gabriela's life, became jealous, and decided who she could and couldn't hang out with. He monitored her phone, demanding immediate responses to his calls and messages, and would throw tantrums if she didn't comply. For the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela downplayed her boyfriend Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, thinking they were temporary and that he would eventually go back to being the kind and caring person she fell in love with. She tried to accommodate all his demands, hoping that his behavior would improve. However, Fabian only became more aggressive and volatile over time. He started to emotionally wear Gabriela down, and his abuse eventually escalated beyond verbal aggression. He would physically intimidate her, slapping her, pulling her hair, and grabbing her hands. Although these actions often left no visible marks, friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. As Gabriela struggled to cope with the abuse, she became withdrawn and depressed. Her friends and family noticed the change in her, seeing the tears in her eyes and the sadness that had replaced her former smile. She started distancing herself from others, avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from speaking to. Gabriela repeatedly tried to have conversations with her boyfriend Fabian, but it was unsuccessful. She even broke up with him multiple times, only to be coerced back into the relationship by Fabian. This pattern of breakups, stalking, and threats continued for over a year. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. He was accused of abuse and assault, and faced possible jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school, forced to complete his education through homeschooling. After this event, Gabriela finally decided to end the toxic relationship for good. However, Fabian refused to accept it. He apologized, made empty promises to change, and begged her to take him back. When Gabriela rejected him, Fabian resorted to stalking, blackmail, and threats in an attempt to control her and maintain their relationship. Fabian stalked Gabriella at her school and home, even attempting to break into her bedroom through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, making constant threats and tearful apologies in an effort to control her. Despite his harassment, Gabriella remained firm in her decision to end the relationship. Fabian would occasionally vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had finally moved on. However, he would inevitably reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her be. He followed her everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing disturbing scenes. As a result, Gabriella became terrified of being alone, always ensuring she was accompanied by friends or family. She would go to her mother's workplace after school, and they would head home together. When she needed to travel, she would ask her father or uncle to escort her. This ordeal continued for months, leaving Gabriella drained and exhausted, though she tried not to show it. A series of tragic events began in early 2018, when the Alcano family was devastated by a terrible crime. A burglar broke into Federico's home, where his second wife lived, and murdered her while the children were at school, and Federico was at work. The perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior criminal record, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother stepped in to support Federico and his children during this difficult time. This tragedy temporarily shifted Gabriella's attention away from Fabian, who had mysteriously disappeared around the same time. Meanwhile, Gabriella was also busy preparing for entrance exams, driven by her ambition to attend one of Santiago's top universities and pursue a career in journalism or advertising. The tragedy was only the beginning of a series of devastating events for the Alcano family. By May 2018, Fabian, Gabriella's ex-boyfriend, began stalking her relentlessly. He would climb over her home's fence or show up at the supermarket or mall, making her feel unsafe everywhere she went. Gabriella was terrified and sent screenshots of threatening messages from Fabian to someone, pleading for help. She confessed her fear for herself and her loved ones, but chose not to tell her family about the stalking and threats, afraid of worrying them. On June 10, 2018, the Alcano family gathered at Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. However, this joyful family event would ultimately be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful, filled with laughter, music, and a large family meal. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and cousins, but appeared troubled and distant. Her uncle Rodrigo noticed her distress and asked if everything was all right. But Gabriella just smiled sadly, shrugged, and said she was nervous without explaining why. Her uncle chose not to press the issue, thinking she would open up when ready, but later deeply regretted this decision. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. At around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, jumped over the fence of his ex-girlfriend Gabriella's house. He planned to sneak into her bedroom through the window and attack her. But just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, Gabriella's mother, had been awakened by the noise and was checking on the commotion. Fabian attacked her, pushing her back inside and stabbing her repeatedly. In total, he inflicted 36 stab wounds, mostly to her chest, neck, and head, leaving her with no chance of survival. Carolina managed to scream briefly, which woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to investigate. As she descended, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and enraged. He grabbed her and dragged her down. Gabriella desperately tried to call emergency services on her phone, but Fabian stopped her. He then stabbed her in the chest, piercing her heart, which proved to be a fatal blow. Fabian moved Gabriella's body to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He attempted to erase his traces by wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom. Finally, he quietly left the house around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. After Carolina failed to show up for work for 2 days and didn't answer her phone, her colleagues became worried. She was a responsible person and wouldn't just disappear without a reason. Her boss contacted Federico, her partner, to ask if he knew what was going on. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone went unanswered. He also tried calling his daughter, Gabriella's phone, but it was turned off. He then called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to the two since Carlos's birthday party. Federico rushed to Carolina's house, which looked empty, but the car was still in the garage. He walked around the house, knocking on doors and peeking through windows, but he didn't want to go inside, even though he had a spare key. Instead, he called the police and asked them to check the house. When the police arrived, they wondered why Federico hadn't used his spare key to enter the house. Federico admitted he was afraid of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he finally opened the door and went in with the officers. That's when they discovered the bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor. They had been dead for over a day. Federico was overwhelmed with grief and desperately called for an ambulance, pleading with someone to save his loved ones. However, the officers had to calm him down, and his agitated behavior raised suspicions. As a result, he was taken outside to a police car for further questioning. When Federico tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was being treated as the prime suspect in a double murder investigation. Rodrigo soon arrived at the scene and was shocked to find that his brother was being held by the police. He was devastated by the news of his niece's death and couldn't understand why there was no ambulance or any medical assistance being provided. Both Federico and Rodrigo were taken in for questioning, and their alibis were thoroughly investigated. Fortunately, they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, as it was established that they were with their family at the time of the crime. Further investigation revealed that Gabriella had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend, with friends providing evidence of threatening messages and voice recordings. Federico remembered the obsessed suitor his daughter had tried to break up with, but he never thought the seemingly harmless boy she had introduced to him was capable of such a horrific crime. The police investigation into Fabian Cesar, the young man, revealed that he had gotten rid of the murder weapon and thrown away clothes with bloodstains. Despite this, his shoes still had tiny blood drops on them, and the pattern on the soles matched prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, 4 of Gabriella's classmates came forward to say they had heard Fabian threaten Gabriella, stating he would rather kill her than let her go. As the evidence and witness statements mounted, Fabian was forced to admit to the crime. However, he tried to present himself as a lovesick individual who had not meant to harm Gabriella, but rather just wanted to talk to her. He claimed that things got out of control, and he ended up dealing with her mother, who unfortunately became an unwanted witness. After completing the autopsies and necessary tests, the authorities returned the bodies of the victims to their families for burial. At the funeral, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was buried in the white dress she had always wanted to wear, and Carolina's casket was closed due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired an experienced lawyer who built a strong defense, promising a reduced sentence during the preliminary hearings. The lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean criminal record, arguing that the dispute with his classmate had been resolved out of court. However, the victim's family demanded that Fabian be charged with femicide. The prosecution rejected this charge, as according to Chilean law, femicide only applies when the perpetrator and victim are spouses or live together, which was not the case for the 2 teenagers. Fabian's lawyer claimed that he had acted impulsively and under distress, which could lead to a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Allen family, understandably, wanted the harshest punishment for him. Following the initial court hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested that he be released pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious, having lost 3 women close to him to violent deaths. The lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriella's law. This law would expand the definition of femicide to include cases where the victims were in romantic relationships with their killers, even if they weren't married or living together. The proposed bill faced opposition because it would mean that perpetrators already in prison for similar crimes could face new charges and lose their eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alem family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriella's law. In August 2019, Chile's government introduced amendments to its femicide law, over a year after the devastating murders. These amendments, known as Gabriella's law, included 15 key changes that were later approved by Congress. Under this new law, femicide is defined as any violent act, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of her relationship with the perpetrator. The law also considers additional circumstances, such as the victim being a minor or having health issues, to be aggravating factors. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years prior. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had no grounds to challenge the charges. Fabian was subsequently convicted of femicide under aggravating circumstances, as one of the victims was a minor, and also of double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimote, Peru, to Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and El Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law, but unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a US visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazarchik family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. 4 months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarchuk couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Alyssa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was, and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazarchuk household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time, and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazarchuk family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazarchuk family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazarchuks, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazarchuks arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Alyssa, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazarevics returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarevic family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. Two female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred, and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone, but the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the doorframe when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, she claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical, as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support. After which, Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later, on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was in prison on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compressors and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma, and despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctor suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found a Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Elle Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal. Kyle's parents shared photos and videos of their 14-month-old son, recounting his life from birth to days before his death. Family members spoke, while others cried. Sentenced to life without parole in 2006, Ada's family refused to give up, citing racial prejudice and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually, 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence. Testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines, and ultimately being removed from life support, with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Quadros, aged 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team, learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent, and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born in Iowa, USA, on November 13, 1979. He grew up in Cedar Falls, a city that is home to the University of Northern Iowa. As a young boy, Tyler joined the Boy Scouts, where he earned the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout. This experience sparked a lifelong love for nature and camping in him. The camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which promoted family bonding, were particularly enjoyable to him. In his free time, he learned to play the trumpet. Tyler's true passion, however, lay in adventure and sports. He was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team at Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls. He also enjoyed outdoor activities like canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Later, his interest in computing led him to Truman State University in Missouri, where he studied computer science and earned his degree. It was there that he met Sarah, who would later become his wife. Sarah was born on March 27, 1980, in Kansas City. During her childhood, she spent time near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam. Sharing Tyler's passion for the outdoors, Sarah enjoyed bird watching and studying insects. Like Tyler, she was a dedicated Girl Scout and earned the highest honor, the Gold Award. Her adventurous spirit was inherited from her mother, with whom she went on a backpacking trip to Central America. It's no wonder that Tyler knew Sarah was his soulmate when he met her as a student. Sarah excelled academically and demonstrated exceptional leadership skills, particularly in student projects focused on enhancing school life. Her positive leadership and inclination earned her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to Truman State University, where she met Tyler. As they fell deeply in love, she readily accepted his marriage proposal. Both Tyler's and Sarah's families supported their decision to marry, recognizing that they were perfect for each other and destined to build a beautiful family together. On June 22, 2002, guests gathered at St. John Lutheran Church for Tyler and Sarah's wedding. Family members took their seats, while Sarah waited outside with her father. At 22, the couple exchanged vows, promising to stay together until death parted them. They chose Boundary Waters for their 10-day honeymoon, sharing a love for nature. In the initial 10 years of their marriage, Tyler and Sarah prioritized establishing financial security and advancing their professional careers. After completing their undergraduate degrees in Missouri, the couple relocated to Lawrence, where they pursued their master's degrees at the University of Kansas. Sarah eventually worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler held jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, and UPS. He also had a long-term career at a company specializing in business billing and payments, which lasted for 18 years. During this period, the Schmidts' marriage was filled with exciting experiences beyond their professional commitments. The couple made it a point to spend quality time together, exploring new outdoor destinations and engaging in various activities. They regularly socialized with family and friends, bonding over their shared love of board games. Occasionally, they participated in events organized by the Lutheran Church. As enthusiastic fans of the Kansas Jayhawks, they attended basketball tournaments held at the Allen Fieldhouse. The year 2013 was a mix of sadness and happiness for the couple. They suffered a significant loss when Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack, leaving his loved ones in grief. However, 2 years later, in 2015, they experienced the joys of parenthood with the birth of their son, Arlo. In 2018, they welcomed their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, into the world. When Arlo turned 6 and Lula was 3, the family made the decision to move to Cedar Falls to be closer to Tyler's family. The community of Cedar Falls warmly welcomed them, and soon they became active members of it. Tyler continued his work as a software engineer, while Sarah took on a role as an assistant at the city's public library. The children enrolled in the preschool program at Lincoln Elementary School. Tyler and Sarah were renowned for their kind nature and willingness to lend a helping hand, making everyone around them feel valued and important. This dedication earned them the admiration and affection of their neighbors and the entire community. Similarly, at the library, Sarah's warm and friendly personality quickly made her a well-known and appreciated figure, both among her colleagues and the wider community. The couple instilled their passion for outdoor activities and nature in their children, Arlo and Lula. In 2021, they began taking their kids camping, and despite their busy schedules, the children loved these trips so much that the parents made time for them whenever possible. By mid-2022, Sarah's workload had increased significantly. She took a day off in June to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary and planned another day off in July for a family vacation. She had to finish a project for the library by July 26th, but was determined not to let it interfere with the family's plans. During the week of July 11th, Sarah told her brother's wife that she would be taking the kids camping at Makata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, a popular destination known for its 13 impressive caves and stunning natural landscapes. On Thursday, July 21st, the family packed up their car and drove 140 miles to reach Makata Caves. The Schmidt family, Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children, Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. As the camping area was crowded, they set up near the park's entrance. A few hours later, around 7 p.m., another family parked their vehicle about 200 feet from the initial family's tent. This family consisted of Joe and Cecilia Sherwin and their 23-year-old son Anthony, who hailed from Nebraska. The Sherwins proceeded to set up 2 separate tents, one for Joe and Cecilia, and another for their son Anthony. At the time, they were on their way back home following a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that had taken them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The journey had been an enjoyable experience, and it had brought Joe, Cecilia, and Anthony closer together. Anthony was a devoted son, praised by his mom for his kind and sensitive nature. He was an excellent student and entrepreneur, working on a lucrative business venture that would financially support his parents. Though his mom, Cecilia, didn't know the details, Anthony kept her updated, mentioning only that his project involved secure emails. At Makata Caves, the campers retired to their tents as night fell. However, their peaceful slumber was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. Just prior to the commotion, a man clad in black had entered the Schmidts' tent, attacking Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was awakened by his sister Lula's screams. As he turned, he was met with a horrifying sight: blood inside the tent. Frantic with fear, he managed to escape and ran to seek help. As he fled, he heard one final shot. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Joe, who were camped nearby, rushed out of their tent amidst the chaos. Joe searched frantically for his son among the campers, asking if anyone had seen him. Arlo, still in a state of panic, continued to run until he encountered the sheriffs. He was screaming for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Cecilia grasped his hand and ran with him to the park entrance. Once there, terrified and unsure of what had transpired, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was beside herself with worry, fearing that her son might be among the victims, since he had been sleeping near the tent where the shots had come from. Cecilia called the Jackson County 911 operator to report hearing gunshots, but she struggled to pronounce the name of the park where she was, making it difficult to convey her location. She explained that she was with a boy who claimed that his parents had been shot. The call between Cecilia and 911 lasted 23 minutes as she answered the operator's questions. The operator relayed the attack to the police and park rangers, but the call was briefly disconnected. Cecilia persisted and called back, only to be put on hold while the dispatcher contacted emergency responders. Despite the tense and nervous atmosphere in the park, Cecilia remained calm thanks to the adrenaline. After providing details about their exact location, she handed the phone to Arlo, the boy. He told the dispatcher that he was in a tent with his mom, sister, and dad, and when he woke up, he saw someone dressed in black holding a gun. When the 911 operator asked the child where his father was, he paused before responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police officers and paramedics arrived at the campsite to find a horrific scene. All occupants of the Schmitz tent were dead. The once peaceful campsite had become a crime scene. Law enforcement immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could have been anywhere. The tactical teams swiftly evacuated Macoka Cave State Park and Camp Shalom, a nearby Christian summer camp located 1.5 miles from the attack site. As officials evacuated visitors, they gathered them outside the park. Once everyone was accounted for, it was clear that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing, and he was armed. During an aerial search at 11 a.m., police found a body. Upon reaching it, they confirmed it was Anthony, deceased. Although an investigation was necessary, police identified him as the prime suspect in the homicides, believing he had committed the attack on the Schmitz before taking his own life. The authorities closed the park following the incident, a measure that remained in place until July 28th. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered their condolences, with their spokesperson expressing devastation on behalf of the entire team, stating that the event had shaken Iowa's tradition of enjoying its natural wonders. But the legacy would continue for the millions of families who recreate in Iowa's parks. As a mark of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the rest of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other political leaders, including the Iowa governor, who expressed horror at the attack and sorrow for the unimaginable tragedy. A U.S. House representative from Iowa tweeted that it was a senseless and horrific crime. Sarah's family was devastated when they lost her. Her sister was particularly heartbroken, feeling as though her life had been turned upside down. She couldn't accept that Sarah was gone, and that she would no longer be able to pick up the phone and talk to her or watch her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend the private funeral service, which was held at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. Meanwhile, as the loved ones of the Schmitz coped with their grief and tried to console and care for Arlo, the authorities continued their investigation into the brutal crime. According to the Iowa Department of Public Safety's findings, which were based on the autopsy results, Tyler died from a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. Sarah's death was caused by sharp force injuries alone, and their young daughter was both shot and strangled. In early August 2022, authorities officially identified Anthony Sherwin as the person responsible for the murder of the Schmidt family. Sherwin, 23, had no prior criminal record and acted alone before taking his own life, according to the police. the investigation failed to uncover any motive behind the attack. The assistant director of the Division of Criminal Investigation clarified that there was no established connection between Anthony and the Schmidt family prior to the incident, despite them being neighboring campers. The Nebraska Police Department assisted in the investigation by searching the Sherwin family apartment, but found no suicide note or any indication that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. His Facebook page yielded no clues, as it was completely blank. Regarding the weapon used in the attack, the assistant director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation reported that a single hand-assembled firearm was recovered near Anthony's body. This type of weapon, commonly known as a ghost gun, is built by individuals using online purchased parts without restrictions, as they lack serial numbers, making them difficult to regulate and trace. Anthony's parents confirmed that their son had built his own weapon using online instructions. However, they clarified that he did this as a challenge, not because he wanted to own a gun. They emphasized that Anthony was responsible and had never hurt anyone or any animal. The parents, Cecilia and her husband, said their family had never owned guns before. But due to Nebraska's rising crime rates, they decided to acquire some. Because they were new to handling guns, they even took classes to learn how to use them properly. They brought the homemade gun on their trip to protect themselves from crime and possible bear attacks, which they had experienced before while camping. They intended to get rid of the gun later. When they returned home, Anthony's parents were determined to prove their son's innocence. They believed he was a victim of murder, not the killer. According to his mother, an independent autopsy report showed that Anthony had been shot twice, not once, as the police claimed. She was puzzled by how he could have shot himself a second time, which challenged the authorities' suicide theory. They also questioned the description of the clothing the attacker wore. Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker was wearing black, which didn't match what her son had on, green shorts she had given him the day before the tragedy occurred. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe claimed that the police did not reveal where they found Anthony's body, or whether the weapon he supposedly used to take his own life was the same one used in the attack on the Schmidts. Cecilia sent an email to the media outlining her concerns about the investigation into her son Anthony's death. She emphasized that Anthony had too many reasons to live and would not have abandoned everything in such a way. In her opinion, Anthony was incapable of killing and had no connection to the Schmidt family, and they had seen no signs of him planning an attack. When she asked investigators if they had conducted a ballistic test to confirm matches, they did not respond. Similarly, when Anthony's parents requested the final investigation report to commission an independent review, they received no response. In January 2023, a media outlet submitted a request for public records related to the case under Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act. The request included incident reports, investigation documents, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, Devin McClone from the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner responded that the requested records were not public, and the office could only share the immediate facts and circumstances of the case, as provided in the press release links. A few days after the tragedy, a media outlet emailed the official to ask if the weapon Anthony used to take his own life was the same one used in the murders, but she never responded. As it stands, the police believe that Anthony Sherwin was a random killer who brutally murdered 3 beloved members of a Cedar Falls family. However, the family of Cecilia and Joe refuses to accept that their son, who was kind and studious, was involved in the crime. They insist that he was another innocent victim and are determined to prove his innocence. Arlo, the sole survivor of the massacre, was taken in by his aunt and uncle in Cedar Falls. In an interview with a local newspaper, Sarah's brother proudly described his nephew as brave and reported that he was doing well mentally. The GoFundMe page set up after the tragedy continues to receive donations to support Arlo's care. And friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Camilleri. Jessica Camilleri, the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple, was born with a mild mental disability. Her IQ was between 55 and 60, placing her in the bottom 1% of the population. People with mild intellectual disability like Jessica learn to communicate and express themselves, but at a slower pace than others. They may take longer to develop skills like speaking, reading, writing, and math, but they can still adapt to daily life. Due to her condition, Jessica was slow in reaching developmental milestones like walking, talking, and coordinating movements. She started school much later than her peers, which made her a target for teasing, discomfort, and bullying from her classmates for being different. As a result, Jessica developed stress, anxiety, and anger, particularly towards females. She also struggled with intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by sudden, repeated outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as angry verbal eruptions that were disproportionate to the situation. At school, Jessica exhibited aggressive behavior towards both students and teachers, including a notable incident where she punched a male student and refused to release her grip, leading to her indefinite suspension and subsequent confinement at home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support her. Jessica's behavioral issues were symptomatic of her intellectual disability and struggled with irrational outbursts of anger. Furthermore, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a chronic brain condition that affects millions of children worldwide, making it challenging for her to regulate her behavior. In addition to these conditions, Jessica also suffered from severe bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorders, which impacted her judgment, self-awareness, and empathy towards others. She had obsessive tendencies, such as fixating on her three favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, each of which she associated with a specific color, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. Jessica would often repeat these numbers to generate random phone numbers, which she would then use to call and talk to men. In one instance, starting in 2018, she began harassing the staff of a meat company in Daylesford, England, even going so far as to threaten the owner's family, claiming she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica had a persistent fascination with horror movies, particularly the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She would spend hours rewatching disturbing videos, and this obsession often led to furious outbursts when her mother, Rita, tried to restrict her access to these films. Jessica and her mother lived together in a house in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Jessica's father, Vince, had divorced Rita during her teenage years due to the strain their daughter's behavioral problems had put on their marriage. Jessica struggled with low self-esteem and a childish, naive outlook, but she also displayed strong narcissistic tendencies. Deep down, she felt she was one of a kind and entitled to special treatment due to her mental disability. This occasionally led her to be exploitative and egocentric. Despite this, Rita remained devoted to caring for her daughter, acknowledging her issues, but feeling a strong sense of responsibility to look after and protect her. Rita even went so far as to reach out and apologize to one of the recipients of Jessica's harassing phone calls, confessing that she was at a loss for how to manage her daughter's behavior. Jessica was very close to her mother, who dedicated her life to taking care of her and meeting all her needs. Instead of sending her to a psychiatric institution for full-time care, her mother chose to keep her at home. In fact, Rita's life revolved around Jessica. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019 was not a standalone incident. In the 6 years leading up to it, Jessica had been convicted twice for assaults that caused actual bodily harm. She had also physically attacked her aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. But she avoided jail time and was always placed in the care of her mother Rita, the one person who could tolerate her behavior. Jessica had also exhibited aggressive behavior towards women she encountered in the streets and shopping centers, lashing out at those she perceived as looking at her wrongly or making her feel ashamed. On one occasion, she was even barred from a doctor's office after becoming violent towards another patient in the waiting room due to paranoia. In early 2018, Jessica's aggressive behavior continued when she attacked a nurse during a hospital visit with her mother Rita. As a result, she was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days to treat a severe episode of mood disorder. She was prescribed lithium for her supposed bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic medications. However, by the end of 2018, about 6 months before the tragic event, Jessica had stopped taking her medication and instead began using natural remedies to manage her conditions. Rita was at her wit's end and paid $2,500 to a medium on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western suburb of Sydney, in a desperate bid to exorcise the demon she believed was possessing her daughter Jessica. Despite her family and friends warning her about the dangers of living with Jessica, Rita remained adamant that her daughter wouldn't hurt anyone. According to Christy, Jessica's older sister, their mother Rita had a heart of gold, always putting others before herself, including Jessica, who continually refused to seek professional help. Rita's sister often voiced her concerns that Jessica might harm her, recognizing Rita's unconditional love for her daughter. However, Rita's motherly love made her oblivious to these warnings, even on the day before the tragic attack, when she had to take Jessica to a police station due to her threatening calls to strangers. Jessica felt humiliated by her mom in a parking lot after visiting her sister due to a stranger's brief presence. Later, when her mom refused to order food from Red Rooster, Jessica called the restaurant 3 times. She then demanded her mom call a doctor, but Jessica's erratic behavior scared him off. At wit's end, Rita called an ambulance to take Jessica to a mental health facility. On the night of July 20th, 2019, Jessica's most severe episode of rage was about to unfold. In a brutal attack, Jessica dragged her 57-year-old mother Rita by the hair to the kitchen of their own home. There, she savagely attacked Rita with 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which broke under the force of her blows. In total, Jessica stabbed Rita over 100 times in the head and neck, driven by a morbid curiosity fueled by her daily obsession with horror films. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Rita's injuries, which included massive trauma to her head and neck, and death by multiple stab wounds that resulted in decapitation at the 2nd vertebrae in her upper neck. Furthermore, Rita's body showed over 90 defensive wounds, indicating that she was conscious for a significant part of the attack. Enduring extreme physical pain and emotional terror at the hands of her own daughter, whom she had lovingly cared for. Jessica's 4-year-old nephew, the son of her older sister Christy, was present during the attack. The boy had been in Rita's care for a few days due to Jessica's apparent improvement. However, he was forced to witness Jessica repeatedly stabbing his grandmother and ultimately decapitating her. When the boy tried to intervene, Jessica attacked him, causing a minor head injury. The traumatic scene was so disturbing that the young boy began vomiting in response. Jessica called the emergency number from her mother Rita's cell phone, confessing to her murder and claiming self-defense, stating that Rita had attacked her first. However, this was not true, and Jessica had actually committed the brutal act. In reality, after killing her mother, Jessica panicked and repeatedly stabbed Rita's lifeless body, ultimately decapitating her and inflicting over 100 wounds. She then dumped Rita's head in a nearby neighbor's front yard. When the police arrived at their St. Clair, Sydney home, Jessica was outside, her clothes stained with her mother's blood, holding a water bottle. She showed no remorse for her actions and was more concerned about her own fate. Jessica asked the police officers and detectives if it was possible to bring someone back to life after decapitation, believing in the possibility of medical miracles that could reattach her mother's head. The police officer responded that this idea was unrealistic, but Jessica insisted, thinking that doctors could perform miraculous surgeries and reattach her mother's head. She also inquired about the potential consequences of her actions, specifically asking if she would face the death penalty. Upon learning that Australia does not have capital punishment, Jessica felt relieved. Furthermore, Jessica confessed to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother came from the horror movies she obsessively watched. A police officer's body camera recorded a chilling conversation at the crime scene on July 20, 2019. At 11:43 p.m., the first responders described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever seen. The next day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court but didn't apply for bail. A friend explained that this was not surprising, as Jessica probably didn't understand the bail process. After a trial that highlighted her long history of mental illness, Jessica was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. She had pleaded not guilty to murder due to her disability. In early 2021, Jessica was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 16 years and 2 months, which would be September 19, 2035. The prosecutor argued that Rita's brutal murder was the culmination of a lifetime of escalating violence by Jessica, which started with hair-pulling and eventually led to a deadly explosive attack. The prosecutor also stated that Jessica posed a moderate to high risk of reoffending and remained a danger to the community. Christy, Jessica's older sister, said that Jessica had killed and butchered their mother, and for that, she could never forgive her. However, Rita's sister held a different view, hoping that Jessica would get the help she needed and that Rita could finally rest in peace, knowing that Jessica was being cared for by a system that had failed her when she was alive. The judge presiding over the case offered counseling services to the jury members, recognizing that the disturbing evidence they had heard could haunt them long after the trial. The judge also admitted that selecting a jury for Jessica's trial was difficult, as many people were reluctant to participate in a trial involving such a disturbing crime. The judge described Rita's murder as one of the most brutal and cruel cases of homicide a court could encounter, emphasizing that the crime's severity was exacerbated by its occurrence in the victim's own home. Jessica's lawyer revealed that his client had expressed regret in a letter to her family after the crime. In the letter, Jessica accepted responsibility for her mother's death, acknowledging that Rita had not provoked her and taking blame for her actions. However, one of the psychiatrists who evaluated Jessica noted that she struggled to communicate through social gestures and displayed a relatively flat affect. The psychiatrist found no evidence of schizophrenia or hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion was that Jessica's risk factors could only be managed in the long term with a comprehensive mental health support plan. Since entering prison, Jessica has persistently caused trouble. Only 2 months after her arrival, on September 9, 2019, she got into a fight with another inmate over food trading and threw a teacup at them. Although she was charged with assault in local court the next day, she did not receive any additional punishment. On October 14, 2019, Jessica attacked another inmate, which resulted in her being placed in solitary confinement in her cell for 5 days. On November 3, 2019, she disobeyed an order, and on July 31, 2020, she damaged property, incurring a fine of $200 Australian dollars. Jessica was involved in another assault on November 21, 2020, which led to her being placed in solitary confinement for 7 days. In January 2021, she was convicted of common assault again, but did not receive any further punishment. Jessica has explained her behavior, saying that other prisoners make her life difficult, regardless of what she does or where she goes. She has also stated that prison life is tough and very different from the outside world. On May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill of the Sydney Supreme Court rejected claims that Kaleri's original sentence was too harsh, and that the judge who sentenced her had misjudged the severity of her crime. However, Justice Hamill did rule that Collaery should be resentenced, a decision supported by Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanaugh. The basis for this decision was Collaery's bizarre behavior, including walking into the street with her mother's head and asking emergency responders if they could reattach it, which demonstrated how out of touch with reality her actions were. After considering the opinions of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill found that Collaery's intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder meant she only had a basic understanding of what was morally wrong. As a result, he ordered that she be resentenced to 16 years in prison, with a minimum of 12 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lucy Landry. Lucy Davies was born in 1971 in Rhondda, a county in England. She was the daughter of Roger and Andrea Davies and had a younger sister named Anna. The family lived in a small, tight-knit community of socially purposed housing, surrounded by stunning mountain scenery. Lucy had a happy and carefree childhood, bonding closely with her sister, who shared similar interests. Her parents often mentioned Lucy's infectious joy, which made her a standout student in primary school. Known for her outgoing and likable personality, Lucy quickly won over her teachers and classmates. With her undeniable beauty, she became one of the most popular and admired girls in school. Lucy and her sister Anna shared a passion for ponies, which led their father to enroll them in the local riding club. This experience taught them discipline and showcased their talent, eventually earning them the right to participate in various events and competitions. By the time Lucy started secondary school, she had developed into an exceptional rider. In addition to her riding skills, Lucy was also a talented musician. She took flute and piano lessons, dedicating long hours to practice and master both instruments. Her hard work paid off, and soon she had a comprehensive understanding of classical music. This led to her acceptance into a youth orchestra and her school's choir group. During this time, Lucy developed a romantic interest in Gareth Jenkins, but she kept it a secret. After completing secondary school in 1989, Lucy decided to pursue a music-related career. She enrolled in the University of Warwick to study for a bachelor's degree, hoping to become a music teacher. However, she soon realized that the degree program wasn't what she had expected. Her passion for music remained, but she didn't enjoy the direction of the program. As a result, Lucy changed her plan and opted to study urban planning instead. Around this time, Lucy met Graham McAllister, and they soon discovered that they shared a similar outlook on life, including a passion for art and common interests. A key aspect of their bond was their matching sense of humor. Their relationship developed naturally, and as they made plans for the future, Lucy decided to introduce Graham to her parents, Roger and Andrea. The meeting went well, and Lucy's parents were convinced that Graham was the right person for their daughter. In fact, they were so confident in their relationship that they bought Lucy a house in Coventry, northwest of London. This gift not only provided Lucy with a stable home, free from the uncertainties of renting and moving, but also reflected their wish for her to start a family. Shortly after moving in, Lucy invited Graham to live with her, and they continued their studies together. In 1995, they welcomed their first child, James. Lucy decided to take a break from university to care for him while Graham continued his studies and worked the night shift at the city's postal sorting office. Over time, this arrangement took a toll on Lucy, who felt bored and isolated at home, caring for their child and often separated from her partner for long periods. To alleviate her boredom, Lucy turned to internet chat rooms, seeking to meet new people and find some distraction. One night, Lucy engaged in lively conversations in various online chat rooms, where she encountered Harold Landry, a 53-year-old American from Louisiana. Growing up in a financially struggling family with a dozen siblings, Harold knew from an early age that he had to rely on his own efforts and determination to succeed. To escape poverty, He dedicated himself to hard work from a young age. His big break came when he realized that the key to success in the oil business wasn't owning wells, but providing essential infrastructure to well owners. Consequently, he founded a company specializing in designing and manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As he had predicted, the business made him incredibly wealthy, eventually earning him billionaire status. By then, Harold split his time between his central hobbies and a property on KML Island in Mexico. He had been married and divorced twice, with children from these unions, whose exact number and identities remained private. One thing was certain, however: Harold ensured that his children lacked nothing. A significant event took place in 1992 when Harold, now single, met a woman 20 years younger who was married. Despite her marital status, Harold used his charms to win her over, undeterred by her family's or husband's potential opposition. On February 6, 1994, Harold took her on an outing in New Orleans, hiring a babysitter to watch her children. After their evening together, Harold dropped his lover off at home and offered to drive the babysitter back to her own place. Surprisingly, no one seemed worried that her husband would discover the infidelity and react angrily. However, that's precisely what happened. Outside his wife's residence, Chris Price had been keeping a close eye on her every move. When the third party said goodbye to her, Chris followed him in his car. A short while later, Harold noticed he was being tailed. Acting on instinct, Harold opened the glove compartment, pulled out a firearm he normally kept there, and prepared for a confrontation. When they both stopped at a red light, the situation escalated. According to the babysitter's account, Harold brandished the revolver at Chris and fired. The bullet severely injured Chris, severing an artery in his neck and damaging a nerve connected to his vocal cord. Chris collapsed on the pavement, but luckily, there was a hospital nearby, allowing him to receive prompt medical attention. The doctors were able to save his life. Harold was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial took place in 1997. The defense attorney argued in the opening statement that Harold's actions were the result of a tragic and sordid affair involving Chris, and that he had acted out of fear and in self-defense. This strategy led the jury, composed of 4 men and 8 women, to convict Harold of the lesser offense of aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after an appeal, Harold was granted probation in exchange for a $500 fine and community service. Although he had hoped to be fully exonerated, he thanked his lawyer, Pat, for his efforts. The 2 men subsequently became close friends. After reaching a confidential agreement with Chris, Harold moved to Covington, where he lived a life of luxury, free from financial worries. When he started chatting with Lucy, he was open about his past, sharing stories about his jobs, romantic escapades, and legal issues. However, instead of deterring Lucy, this honesty only strengthened her attraction to him. The two began a captivating online romance, with Harold promising her a highly desirable lifestyle. Eventually, his persistence and persuasive abilities convinced Lucy to end her relationship with Gra, clearing the way for Harold to pursue her without any rival claiming his attention. In the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet Lucy, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents, Roger and Andrea, as her boyfriend. Although they were surprised by the significant age difference, they respected their daughter's decisions and did not object to the relationship. Harold felt fulfilled and fortunate to share his life with Lucy, and he spared no effort to surprise her, whether with luxurious gifts or anything else she desired. In fact, by then, he was so in love that he was already planning to propose marriage. However, he wanted to do it in an ideal setting. To achieve this goal, Harold took Lucy, her son James, and Gra on a trip to Mexico, a place that had become his favorite destination in the world. His longtime friend Pat, who had been his attorney in the past trial, also had an apartment close to his residence, which added to the feeling of comfort. Initially, Harold bought a diamond ring and shared the news with enthusiasm with Pat. However, Pat harbored certain suspicions about Lucy, and as the days passed, he found it strange that she had dedicated a good part of her time in Gra's company. Despite this, Harold was oblivious to it, and ultimately proceeded with his plan to propose. Lucy happily accepted the proposal, and in mid-2003, the couple celebrated their union. Shortly after, Harold surprised Lucy by buying a $1 million property in an exclusive Worcester neighborhood. In this peaceful rural setting, their marriage got off to a prosperous start, helped by their excellent neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, with whom they formed a close friendship. Soon, Lucy gave birth to their first daughter, Harriet, which filled both her and Harold with joy. From then on, he devoted himself to the little girl with unwavering energy and commitment. He also maintained a loving relationship with James, treating him like his own son. As time passed, Lucy's workload increased, and her mood began to deteriorate in proportion to Harold's demands. He expected her to constantly adapt to his preferences and obey his requests without question. Lucy, however, had different expectations. This led to rising tensions between them. Lucy was outspoken and unafraid to express her opinions, but Harold was unwilling to compromise. Given their volatile personalities, their arguments frequently escalated into intense fights, followed by reconciliations once the conflict had subsided. The constant disputes that lasted for hours became a familiar background noise in the lives of Rachel and Stephen. They knew that Lucy and Harold's alcoholism fueled their arguments and complaints, which often led to days of not speaking to each other. Lucy reconnected with Gareth, an old friend from secondary school, and they spent hours catching up, occasionally interrupted by their own commitments. One evening, after Harold fell asleep, Lucy stayed on her computer, and it dawned on him that she was unhappy and looking for a distraction, possibly even a replacement, just like she had found him. In the autumn of 2009, Lucy invited Gareth to stay with her. Meanwhile, Harold returned to England, hoping to salvage their marriage, but as soon as he arrived home, Lucy asked him for a divorce. Initially, Harold was devastated, but after a few weeks, he started a new relationship with a woman he met online. Alongside their budding new relationships, divorce negotiations were progressing, and as is often the case, new disputes arose, particularly regarding the family home. Lucy's expectation was to retain the house, thereby guaranteeing a stable living arrangement for their children. However, Harold was adamant that this was not up for discussion. His proposed solution involved offering her financial compensation to purchase a more modest apartment independently. Simultaneously, he made the decision to entirely remove her from his will. Lucy was furious when she learned about her still husband's latest decisions. Her intense hatred towards him led her to share every detail about Harold's past with her son James, holding nothing back. Amidst the tension and complicated situation, Gareth invited her to take a break and spend a few days with him in Wales. Both Lucy and Harold had a serious drinking problem, and their arguments were becoming increasingly violent, leaving their children to suffer in a toxic environment. On the afternoon of February 1st, 2010, Harold had several glasses of wine. When Stephen returned from work, he found a notification that his package had been delivered to the wrong address, the Landrys. Harold invited Stephen in and offered him a glass of wine. This led to a ridiculous argument with Lucy over a piece of furniture she wanted to buy for their upcoming move. The argument quickly turned physical, and in the chaos, Harold grabbed a kitchen utensil and hit Lucy on the cheek. James rushed to the scene of the altercation and found his mother, Lucy, badly injured. He immediately called the police and then turned his attention to ensuring his younger sister's safety. Shortly after, Lucy, realizing she needed help, left the house with her children. Her first thought was to seek refuge at Stephen's house, which was nearby. As she headed in that direction, Harold caught up with her and attacked her with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. He then left her lying under a bush in the garden, abandoning her. Stephen, alerted by Lucy's screams, rushed outside and found her just a few steps away. Initially, he thought she was unconscious, but quickly realized the gravity of the situation. The police responded promptly to the emergency call and arrived on the scene. They called for paramedics and searched the surrounding area for Harold, but only found the terrified children hiding in the backyard. The paramedics worked quickly to treat Lucy and rushed her to the hospital, where her heart unfortunately stopped beating shortly after arrival. Harold visited Rachel's house and confessed to her that a terrible event had occurred, but he didn't provide any additional information. He handed her 3 bank drafts worth a total of $40,000, some cash, the keys to his car, and several signed blank checks. After that, he headed back home. By then, multiple police patrols were searching for him. They eventually found him walking along the road and arrested him. Roger and Andrea were consumed by grief when they heard the devastating news. In a statement released by the police, they requested that people respect their privacy during this incredibly difficult time following the loss of their daughter. From that point on, their focus shifted to taking care of their grandchildren. The forensic examination revealed that Lucy's death was caused by multiple stab wounds to the chest. With this evidence, combined with James's eyewitness testimony, Harold was charged with murder on February 5, 2010, when he appeared in court. The trial took place in early February 2011, presided over by Judge David Fosin. Unlike previous instances, Pat did not serve as Harold's defender. Instead, attorney Andy Childs took on the role. Despite the challenging task ahead, Childs argued that Harold had been provoked by his wife's intense anger, leaving him no choice but to react as he did. During his emotional testimony, Harold expressed his love for Lucy and regretted his actions. Following the strategy outlined by his lawyer, Harold admitted to involuntary manslaughter, claiming that Lucy had driven him to his limits. To emphasize the brutality of the case, the prosecution presented a detailed animation in court, recreating the multiple injuries the victim suffered. This graphic presentation shocked those present in the courtroom. Ultimately, on February 24, 2011, the jury delivered a verdict after less than 4 hours of deliberation. They found Harold Landry guilty of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Landry, when he was 64 years old. The next day, the judge imposed the sentence. He strongly condemned Harold's actions, calling them indescribable and unforgivable. The judge rejected Harold's claims that Lucy may have provoked him, seeing them as a desperate attempt to avoid blame. As a result, Harold received a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. By the time he would be eligible, he would be over 80 years old. Lucy's loved ones expressed gratitude, not only for the resolution of the case, but also for the judge's thoughtful comments, which they felt accurately reflected their own emotions. They acknowledged that the sentence brought some sense of relief from their pain, although they recognized that no length of sentence could restore Lucy's life, and they would need to come to terms with this difficult reality. Harold, on the other hand, maintained his claim of innocence, stating that he hoped to appeal the sentence in the future. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born in Iraq in 1985. She grew up in a traditional family with strong religious beliefs. When she was 10, her family moved to the UK, but their cultural values remained unchanged. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who spoke no English and was illiterate. The marriage was marked by physical and emotional abuse, which Banaz endured for 2 years before finally finding the courage to leave. Despite her family's disapproval, Banaz started a new life and met a man named Rahmat Suleimani, with whom she fell deeply in love. However, their relationship was kept secret due to the cultural taboos surrounding romance outside of marriage. Tragically, Banaz's family was not willing to let her move on from her past. On January 26, 2006, Rahmat reported Banaz missing to the police, but they didn't take the report seriously, convinced that she was just staying with friends. However, Rahmat persisted, and eventually the police were forced to investigate. Banaz's family had a sinister motive for their behavior, which would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. However, Banaz had found love and happiness with her boyfriend, Rahmat. They had dreams of getting married, having children, and building a happy family life. These fantasies brought Banaz joy and kept her going despite her family's hatred and aggression towards her. Her family had never accepted her husband, and in early October 2005, Banaz noticed that she was being followed by people sent by her father. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police and told them about her life with her husband, the injuries she had suffered, and the surveillance she was under. She shared her fears for her safety and even her life, but the police did not take her statement seriously. For about 2 months, Banaz and Rahmat met secretly, but in early December 2005, they were spotted by people from her clan. This led to a council of male relatives gathering at her family home, where it was decided that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation and reported it to the police, but they again did not take her words seriously. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father tricked her into going to a relative's house, where she was attacked. She managed to escape and went to the police, who took her to the hospital. After being discharged, Banaz went to live with Rahmat. However, by mid-January 2006, Banaz's family began urging her to return home to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rahmat. Despite her fears, Banaz agreed to go back to her father's house, believing that her mother would protect her. Before Banaz Mahmoud returned to her family's home, she visited the police station to report her concerns and name individuals who might harm her. However, she disappeared on January 22, 2006, and her friend Rahmat was unable to contact her. Rahmat then filed a missing persons report with the police. The police eventually became involved in the case, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was appointed to lead the investigation. She organized a large-scale search of properties associated with the Mahmoud family, suspecting that Banaz might be being held captive. The police questioned Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband, as well as 3 of her cousins, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Hamid, who were also suspects. Despite the efforts of the police, Banaz's family was uncooperative and refused to help with the investigation. The police found no pictures of Banaz at her family's home, and her family members gave contradictory and false statements about her whereabouts. The police arrested 30 people, including Banaz's family members and cousins, but they all tried to slow down the investigation by giving false information. The police obtained permission to install listening devices in the cells of the arrested men, including Banaz's father, uncle, and Muhammad Hamid. The wiretap recordings revealed that the 3 men had no remorse for their actions and were actually proud of what they had done to Banaz. The recordings revealed that on the morning of January 23rd, the Mahmoud family deliberately left their home, allowing Ali Hussein and Hamid to enter and attack Banaz. The attack lasted for 2 hours, during which Banaz was subjected to beatings and violence. Finally, Hamid strangled her to death with a cord. The wiretap recordings also revealed that Banaz's cousin, Muhammad Hamid, had been involved in the attack and had threatened Rahmat, which became a turning point in the investigation. The police were horrified as they listened to recordings that detailed the brutal murder of Banaz and the perpetrators' proud descriptions of their actions. The investigation revealed that Banaz's body had been stuffed into a suitcase and taken out of London to a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good, a detective, matched the information she received with the movement data of the arrested phones and determined the search area. Despite the vastness of the area, the work could take a long time, but the criminals themselves helped the investigation by being talkative and reveling in their actions. During the conversation, one of them mentioned putting a freezer back in its place, which gave Caroline a key lead to follow. A police helicopter was dispatched to search the area, and while circling, it spotted a house with a pile of trash in the backyard, including a white, oblong object that looked like a freezer. When the police inspected the area, they started digging in shifts. As they dug, they eventually reached a depth of about shoulder height. At this point, they were about to give up. But then Caroline Good recalled the words of Muhammad Hamama, who had bragged about burying Banaz so deeply that she would only be discovered if someone tipped them off. Caroline convinced the team to extend the search for one more day, and late in the evening of April 28, 2006, the suitcase was found. Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, and only dental records and DNA samples could be used to identify her. Her body was folded into a fetal position and hidden in a suitcase, buried under a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged, but they showed no remorse and were convinced they had done the right thing. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police received a flood of people providing alibis for the suspects, claiming they were in public on the day of the alleged murder. In total, 50 people were involved in Banaz's death, and Caroline Good felt anger, disgust, and contempt for the men who participated in the murder. The case eventually went to trial in March 2007, and the prosecutor described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution ordered by Banaz's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury found all three guilty and sentenced them to life imprisonment with minimum terms ranging from 17 to 23 years. The judge condemned the crime as barbaric and heartless, saying that the father had put his status in society above the life of his own flesh and blood. Muhammad Ali was arrested in Iraq in April 2006 for a crime against a young woman named Banaz Mahmoud. The London police worked to extradite him to the UK. In June 2009, Ali was extradited and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. The last of the 5 perpetrators, Omar Hussein, was hiding in the Iraqi countryside. In December 2009, he got into an argument with his brother and was shot in the leg. He was taken to the hospital, where the police arrested him. Initially, Hussein denied being in London in 2005 and therefore couldn't be involved in Banaz's death. However, UK social security records proved that he was receiving refugee benefits at the time, contradicting his claim. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited and later sentenced to life imprisonment. Donna Ammon, who was in the house at the time of Banaz's murder, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for helping to dispose of the victim's body and obstructing justice. A recorded interview at the police station revealed her family's guilt. Banaz had tried to leave her abusive husband several times, but returned to try again at the insistence of her family. The police's indifference to her plight led to her death, which sparked significant changes in how honor killings are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched, and 9 police officers were prosecuted for their inadequate response. 7 received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. Caroline Good, a determined detective, not only found Banaz's body, but also secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought back the escaped criminals from Iraq. Unfortunately, this wouldn't bring Banaz back to life, or change the fact that her own relatives, who should have protected her, were responsible for her death. Banaz was buried in the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by a granite memorial headstone at her grave. Her family did not attend either service. The memorial was paid for by law enforcement officials working on the Banaz case and the women's rights organization. Ramat Suleimani, Banaz's boyfriend, remained in the UK under the Witness Protection Program, but never recovered from her death. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself, marking his 3rd attempt to end his life. The extent of the problem with police handling of honor crimes is unknown due to the lack of recording requirements. However, estimates suggest that in 2000, there were 5,000 honor killings worldwide, and in 2010, over 2,800 cases of honor-based violence were reported in Iran and Kurdistan. These crimes typically involve women who are perceived to have brought shame to their families or communities. Most cases occur in South Asia or the Middle East, predominantly in Muslim communities. However, cases like that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmoud, a Kurdish woman living in Britain, highlight the tensions faced by immigrant communities as they struggle to adapt to changing lifestyles. Some groups estimate that thousands of honor crimes go unreported in minority communities in Britain, where women are often taken abroad and forced into marriage or harmed when their modern outlook on life conflicts with their traditional male communities. Banaz Mahmoud, who was murdered in 2006, is a tragic example of this. Her older sister, Beal, urges other women in similar situations not to be afraid to seek help before it's too late. Even today, Beal lives in fear for her life, hiding her identity behind a long black veil that covers her entire body and face, except for her eyes. The story of Banaz Mahmoud is a stark reminder that women who try to escape or live a secret life are constantly in fear of being found and punished. The Metropolitan Police team that investigated Banaz's murder and brought those responsible to justice was awarded for their work in detective investigation. A crucial piece of evidence was a videotape that captured Banaz's nervous testimony, in which she described the violence and oppression she faced at the hands of her abusive husband and the intimidation she suffered from men on the street. She warned of her impending death due to the shame she had brought upon her family. Unfortunately, her warnings were ignored, and she was ultimately killed. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Mandadi. Kaylee Anita Mandadi was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tak Mandadi and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and Tak working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butin, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became like a second dad to her. Kaylee was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaylee excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers, leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends. Kaylee was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group, where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaylee met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaylee's first 2 meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. The young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident in which Kaylee was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaylee was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaylee's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaylee had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaylee's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaylee at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaylee. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kay, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaylee Mandadi's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaylee in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's actions, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, a type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury, on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaylee suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaylee was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaylee on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaylee Mandadi had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believed that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it, due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault, causing harm that led to the death of Kaylee Mandadi. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilsey County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, she established a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Stern. As their only child, Sarah received all their love and attention due to her mother's health issues, which made it impossible for her to have more children. Sarah grew up to be an outgoing, cheerful, and energetic kid. She was actively involved in school theater, photography, drawing, and sports, competing in swimming and softball. Her dream was to become an artist or designer, and she planned to attend a local college for arts. Tragedy struck in 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. This devastating loss sent Sarah into depression, but she tried to support her grieving father, Michael, with whom she lived. They found comfort in their dog, Buddy, whom Sarah adored. Sarah's life was finally taking a turn for the better. After graduating from college, she planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before that, she had always dreamed of traveling the world, with Canada being her top destination. She even considered living there for a while. Meanwhile, Michael Stern frequently traveled out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a time. But he never worried about leaving his daughter Sarah alone at home because she was a responsible and independent young adult. And their town was known for being quiet and safe. However, during one of Michael's business trips in December 2016, trouble arose. On the night of December 3rd, around 2:30 a.m., a taxi driver called the police station to report an abandoned car on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was deserted and rarely visited at night, making the empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home over the old bridge, had stopped to check if anyone needed help when he saw the car parked by the side of the road. Finding the car empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting that the driver might have abandoned their car to jump into the water below. a tragic but not uncommon occurrence at that spot. The police found an abandoned silver sedan on a bridge with the keys still in the ignition, but no signs of blood or struggle. They suspected that the owner might have gone there to commit suicide by jumping into the river. After checking the car's ownership, they found it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Stern, who lived in the same town. When the officers visited Lily, they found her alive and well. She told them that she hadn't driven for years due to poor eyesight, and that her 19-year-old granddaughter Sarah used the car. Lily tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. Lily then gave the officers her son's address, where Sarah lived, and mentioned that her father was away on a work trip. When the police went to the house, they found the back door open, which was concerning. After searching the house, they didn't find anything suspicious, except for a locked-in dog whining in one of the bedrooms. The house was in order, with no signs of struggle, blood, or evidence of an intruder. However, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Michael Stern rushed home on the first available flight after learning about the situation. When he arrived, the homeowner informed him that nothing was out of place or missing, including all of Sarah's personal belongings, such as her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, which she always carried with her. The police shared their initial theory with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the bridge intending to jump, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal thoughts or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but with support from family, friends, and her studies, she had recovered. She had ambitious plans for her future, including becoming a designer and traveling the world. Despite this, on the night of December 3rd, Sarah disappeared from her home, and her car was found abandoned on the bridge just hours later. These were the known facts, and the investigation now needed to focus on identifying who Sarah had been in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who was the last person to see her. After Sarah Stern's disappearance, early witnesses came forward to reveal that she had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam had valuable information that could help solve the mysterious case. The police quickly decided to interview him to gather details and piece together what had happened that day. When the police arrived at Liam's house, they met his mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after working a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke Liam up, who seemed puzzled by the situation. Upon learning about Sarah's disappearance, Liam was shocked and confirmed that they had indeed spent the previous day together. He agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam and Sarah attended college together and decided to skip their last 2 lectures on Friday morning. After classes, they went back to her place, where they spent the day playing video games, chatting, and discussing their future plans. They left her house twice, once to get food from a nearby fast food restaurant, and again to visit a local supermarket around 7 p.m. Liam then left Sarah's house to start his night shift at a 24-hour store and didn't see her again after that. When questioned about Sarah's mental state, Liam shared that she had been struggling with depression since her mother's death. She was torn between wanting to end her life or running away to start fresh. Liam also revealed that Sarah had difficulty communicating with her father and finding common ground with him. Although Liam didn't rule out the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, he mentioned that she had recently considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money for Canadian dollars. This was later confirmed when a small amount of Canadian currency was found in her bedside table drawer, although it wasn't enough to cover much. Preston Taylor, a close friend of Sarah's and her prom date, corroborated Liam's statement. He added that Sarah was struggling with depression and speculated that she might have either run away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, Preston was overcome with emotion, expressing his deep affection for Sarah. The idea that Sarah had fled to Canada or elsewhere was quickly ruled out, as she didn't have her passport and couldn't have left the country. Investigators then focused on the possibility that Sarah might have jumped off the bridge, and a massive search effort was launched in the river. The strong current in the area complicated the search, as it could have carried a body far from the bridge. To aid in the search, divers were deployed, specialized equipment was used, and hundreds of volunteers, along with police, scoured the riverbanks for any signs of Sarah or her belongings. Liam and Preston were among the volunteers who actively helped search for Sarah. Unfortunately, the search efforts yielded nothing, and no sign of Sarah was found. As a result, the authorities decided to continue interviewing people who knew Sarah well, which led to the discovery of a strange inconsistency. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as being in great spirits, with none of them aware of any problems she had with her father. In fact, she often spoke about him in a warm and loving way. However, after she disappeared, her friends Liam and Preston seemingly took on the role of grieving relatives, garnering sympathy from many, but their behavior soon raised suspicions, as if they were acting for an audience. Despite only recently becoming close, the police decided to re-question Liam and Preston, noticing that their behavior was odd. During the re-questioning, Liam appeared deeply distressed when asked about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam revealed that the three of them grew up together, attended the same school, and shared their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston had even taken Sarah to the prom, but their relationship was purely platonic. Liam considered Sarah like a sister, and they had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah trusted him completely and had confided in him about the large sum of money her mother had left her, which was mostly stored in a safety deposit box. Sarah supposedly distrusted her father, who she thought wanted the money for himself, so she kept it in the bank with plans to withdraw it later to escape to Canada. However, Michael Stern disputed this story, providing a different account. According to Stern, his wife had been saving money for their daughter's future expenses, such as education, a wedding, or a home, since Sarah's birth. They stored the cash at home in a shoebox, which contained old and worn bills that didn't seem significant at the time. After his wife's passing, Stern gave the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills into the bank. Sarah followed his advice, putting some of the money in her checking account for daily expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money to fund her university education and travel the world. Michael firmly denied any claim to the money for his own use. The discovery of the missing student's large sum of money led investigators to suspect that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. They decided to investigate her financial transactions, including her safety deposit box and bank records. The investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount of money from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared. She also visited her bank to withdraw cash from her safety deposit box. The detectives were surprised to find that Sarah was not alone during her bank visit. Bank surveillance footage showed that Liam accompanied her. This raised new questions, as Liam had failed to mention this visit during previous questioning. When asked about it, Liam hesitated before explaining that Sarah trusted only him and had asked for his accompaniment because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash home alone. His explanation seemed reasonable, and his behavior appeared natural. A security camera at a house opposite the Stern residence captured footage of the street and neighboring yards. The footage showed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. The silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. that night. About a month after Sarah's disappearance, an acquaintance named Anthony came to the police station with a disturbing story. Unaware of the events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. It turned out that Anthony had been classmates with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, pursued a passion for filmmaking, remaining in touch only with Liam, who shared his interest in cinema. About a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited Anthony, and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a teenage horror movie. Liam came up with a plot where a girl tells a friend about a large sum of money she has, and the friend gains her trust before strangling her and dumping her body in a river. Anthony liked the idea, and they wrote a couple of pages of the script that night. Anthony later moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and left town to work as a camera assistant on a film shoot. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him, asking if the police had questioned him about anything. Anthony was surprised by the question and learned about Sarah's disappearance and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it. He decided to go to the police himself. The authorities instructed Anthony to have an open conversation with Liam and try to get him to confess. To do this, Anthony invited Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, knowing Liam's desire to be in a movie. Liam took the bait and suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. The police installed a hidden camera in Anthony's car and told him to carefully get Liam to confess when they met. When Liam got into the car, he looked around cautiously, then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, saying it was for the filming equipment. Anthony asked where Liam got the old money, and Liam hesitated before admitting that it belonged to Sarah, saying that he and Preston had taken it from her house because the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide further details, his admission was enough evidence for the police to arrest him and Preston on suspicion of being accomplices. Preston agreed to cooperate with the authorities and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted to helping his friend Liam cover up the evidence and dispose of Sarah's body, but claimed he did not participate in the murder itself. According to Preston, Liam had planned to steal Sarah's inheritance as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept the inheritance a secret, even from her best friend, but revealed it to Liam when she started planning a trip to Canada. Liam convinced her to withdraw the money from the bank and keep it in a home safe, and even borrowed a significant amount from her before the murder. When Sarah's father was away on a business trip, Liam put his plan into action. He promised Preston $25,000 to help him, but planned to do the actual killing himself. Liam convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, and then spent the day with her, waiting for the right moment to strike. He locked her dog in another room, approached Sarah from behind, and strangled her. The crime unfolding was more complicated than anticipated. Initially, Sarah, being athletic and strong, put up a fierce struggle until she lost consciousness. However, she would occasionally show signs of life, making it difficult for the perpetrator to be certain of her demise. It took around half an hour to confirm that Sarah had stopped breathing. After leaving Sarah's house, Liam went to work, at which point Preston entered the house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view. Preston dragged Sarah's body to the garage and cleaned up the room. A few hours later, Liam returned to Sarah's house, took a small safe from her room, and placed the body in the car. He drove away carefully to avoid being captured on the neighbor's camera. Liam met Preston at the bridge, where they disposed of the body in the river. They wiped down the steering wheel and drove back to Liam's house in Preston's car to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe, rather than the expected $100,000. Despite this, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only used the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Despite confessing, Liam McAtasney denied involvement, trying to blame his friend instead. His lawyer claimed he was innocent, suggesting Taylor had acted alone. Since Sarah's body was never found and her disappearance was still unclear, there was a small chance she was still alive, having vanished without her belongings. However, a search of Liam's house found a key matching the buried safe. Identified by Preston, The trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the lack of a body and Liam's denials, his guilt was proven through evidence. The script written months before the incident, the key found in his home, his recorded words in Anthony's car, and the old bills he provided all contributed to the verdict. Furthermore, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that Liam was absent from work that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor will be eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him, without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to re-establish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken" for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. 4 months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natalee Holloway. 18-year-old Natalee Holloway, who disappeared while on a trip to Aruba, an island in the southern Caribbean Sea near Venezuela. In May 2005, a group of 124 students from Mountain Brook High School, accompanied by 7 chaperones, traveled to Aruba to celebrate the start of their adult lives. The students stayed at the Holiday Inn and had access to beaches, palm trees, restaurants, and local entertainment venues. They spent 5 unforgettable days on the island, enjoying themselves with swimming, sunbathing, dancing, and partying. However, on the day of their return, Natalee Holloway was nowhere to be found. Her belongings, phone, and passport were still in the hotel, but she had vanished. Her mother, Elizabeth Twitty, was the first to raise the alarm and reported her concerns to one of the chaperones. Elizabeth recalled that at that moment, her heart sensed something was wrong, as her daughter was obedient and always stayed in touch. Natalee's mother and stepfather immediately flew to Aruba to search for her. Upon arriving, Elizabeth was able to find out more information than the police did, as the authorities seemed uninterested in starting a search. The police told Elizabeth that cases like this are not rare, and that people often miss their planes or get lost in bars or with new acquaintances. However, Elizabeth knew her daughter and was convinced that something was seriously wrong. Natalee Holloway was last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's nightclub with 17-year-old Jan, a local regular, who had offered her a drink. They left with 2 other young men in a silver Honda car. 4 hours later, Natalee's mother, Elizabeth, contacted the police again with concerning information, leading to the detention of the trio. Initially, Vanda Slot denied knowing Natalee, but later admitted to leaving the bar with her. They drove around, visited the beach, and then dropped her off near the hotel. His friends, Deepak and SES Kalpo, confirmed his account. Natalee was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth Ann and David Edward Holloway. Her parents loved each other dearly, but divorced after 13 years. Natalee and her brother stayed with their mother, but their father remained supportive emotionally and financially. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, and Natalee moved to Mountain Brook. The move was smooth, and she made new friends easily due to her sociable nature. Her family was devout, attending church every Sunday, which influenced Natalee's upbringing. Relatives remembered her as kind, modest, and beautiful, with a radiant smile. Natalee was an excellent student, engaged in dance, and participated in various clubs. She dreamed of pursuing a career in medicine and had chosen a local university for a substantial scholarship. At the time, she had promising life prospects and was excited about an upcoming trip. Elizabeth believed her daughter was unlikely to trust a stranger or get into a car with him. Surveillance footage from the bar confirmed her suspicions, showing Natalee's behavior changed after drinking a beverage offered by Jan, suggesting she was under the influence of some substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie spoke well of Natalee, but Vanda Slot had a questionable reputation, often behaving poorly, indulging in gambling, and consuming forbidden substances. He had previously recorded and uploaded videos of his exploits to the internet, but was never held accountable due to his father's influence as a well-known lawyer aiming for a judgeship. The disappearance of Natalee sparked a nationwide search, with the island authorities launching an extensive operation to find her. Volunteers, divers, and specially trained dogs were deployed to cover a vast area. The government even declared a public holiday, and 50 Marines combed the coastline. An airplane equipped with thermal imaging scanned over 40 kilometers of terrain, but Natalee seemed to have vanished into thin air. On June 30th, investigators discovered that there was no footage of Natalie entering a building, which contradicted the statements of Jan and the Kalpoe brothers. The police brought them in for questioning again, and this time, the younger van der Sloot unexpectedly changed his story. He claimed to have dropped Natalie off at a location without surveillance, not near the hotel, and added that he saw a figure in black moving towards her. Hotel security staff who were on duty that night were detained, with investigators suspecting they might have intercepted Natalie on her way. On June 9th, detectives arrested the suspicious trio, and one of the security guards shared a cell with the Kalpoe brothers. The guard learned a crucial detail. Sadish confessed that he and Deepak had lied to cover for their friend, leaving Jan alone with Natalie on the beach. The security guards were released on June 13th, and on June 17th, another suspect, Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ, was detained. The police suspected his involvement in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot was brought in for questioning and detained, but he was released on June 26th due to insufficient evidence. Jan offered a third explanation of the events, trying to shift the blame onto the Kalpoe brothers, claiming he parted ways with Natalie near his home and she left with them. However, his story was not taken seriously. A lawyer defended Sadish and Deepak, and on July 4th, after a brief trial, the Kalpoe brothers were released. Jan van der Sloot, born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, was one of 3 brothers in a large family. He was a good student, excelled in sports, and planned to attend St. Leo University in Florida. Jan's childhood was marked by a strained relationship with his mother, Anita, an art teacher, who considered him an incubator liar. He grew up rebellious, often ran away from home, and fell in with a bad crowd, developing a penchant for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as cool and fearless to his friends. Locals were suspicious of Jan's lenient attitude, fearing it would lead to trouble. However, he was popular among girls and often took advantage of them. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie persisted. US authorities closely monitored the progress and provided substantial financial support. Despite the scrutiny, the Holloway family was desperate to find their daughter alive and announced a monetary reward, which initially started at $50,000. As hope dwindled, the reward increased to $1 million. Additionally, $100,000 was offered for information leading to the location of her remains, which later increased to $250,000. During this time, the investigation hit several dead ends. However, after the reward announcement, new witnesses emerged. One claimed to have seen Jan with the Kalpoe brothers at a local night spot between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Another witness claimed to have seen several suspicious men hiding a woman's body at a dump on the afternoon of May 30th. However, these statements led the investigation astray, and after numerous checks, their claims were not corroborated. On August 26th, the police detained the Kalpoe brothers and another young man, but these actions were unrelated to the case. The arrest was more about intimidation and an attempt to get them to talk. Ultimately, on September 3, 2005, all 4 were released on bail. A week and a half later, the court removed all restrictions and prohibitions, as none provided any substantial leads to the investigation. Jan van der Sloot was detained for 3 months, but after his release, he sought to capitalize on his notoriety by giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. In these appearances, he claimed that Natalie Holloway had flirted with him and offered to have sex. But he declined because he didn't have a condom. However, during one show, he became aggressive and threw a glass at the interviewer. A journalist who was targeted by Jan's glass-throwing incident held a grudge against him and worked with authorities to place a bug in a friend's car. The bug captured Jan confessing to witnessing Natalie's death. He claimed that they had sex on the beach, but afterward, she began shaking, lost consciousness, and eventually died. Jan and a friend then disposed of her body at sea. Despite this confession, Jan managed to avoid consequences by denying the statement on another TV show, claiming he had only told his friend what he wanted to hear. In 2007, Jan released a book, The Case of Natalee Holloway, my own account of her disappearance in Aruba, in which he presented his side of the story and apologized to Natalee's family. By this time, the official investigation had largely stalled. In 2008, two new witnesses came forward. The first reported seeing Jan and his father on the beach around 4 a.m. on the night Natalee went missing. The younger van der Sloot appeared disheveled, and the witness saw him arguing with his father in a car before they drove away. However, Paulus van der Sloot had an alibi for the night in question. The second witness was Jan's former girlfriend, who recalled that Jan had once made a suspicious comment about being able to dispose of someone's body. However, this was not considered a strong lead, given Jan's history of lying and exaggeration. Jan and the Kalpoe brothers were detained multiple times, but released due to lack of evidence. The Holloway family hired a private investigator who, along with Natalee's father, conducted their own investigation, interviewing locals and searching the landfill. During this time, they uncovered several oversights by the local police, including failure to interview Natalee's classmates or hotel room neighbors. It was also discovered that someone had used Natalee's hotel key several times on the night of her disappearance, and that her mobile phone and toothbrush had been left behind. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation ultimately revealed that the Aruban authorities had been negligent in their handling of the case. Jan's father, Paulus, died of a heart attack in 2010, reportedly due to the stress and shame of his son's actions. After his father's death, Jan attempted to blackmail the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth for $250,000. The family agreed to meet with him and paid an advance of $25,000. During the meeting, Jan provided yet another version of events, claiming that Natalee had resisted his advances, which enraged him, and that he had pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. He then buried her body in a building foundation. However, the police investigation revealed that Jan's claims were false, as the house he pointed to had long been built, and its foundation was fully set at the time of Natalee's disappearance. Jan fled to Peru with the money, but unfortunately, the consequences did not catch up with him immediately. On June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez was discovered in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had been severely beaten, and the cause of her death was determined to be a neck fracture. Surveillance cameras quickly helped identify the criminal, and soon after, Jan was arrested and taken to the police station. He explained that he had met Stephanie at a casino, and after playing poker, they decided to continue their acquaintance in his hotel room. However, when Stephanie accessed his laptop and discovered his connection to Natalee Holloway's death, she became frightened and wanted to leave. Jan realized what had alarmed her, became enraged, and struck her until she died. Jan was captured on his way to Chile and confessed to the crime on the 4th day of his arrest. The news shocked residents in the US, especially as it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalee's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty expressed her grief, noting that justice had finally been served, albeit at the cost of another life. Jan was sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 11, 2012, for the premeditated crime against Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in compensation to the Ramirez family. In 2014, Jan was transferred from Pedras Gordas prison to Chalet Pala prison, where he met a Peruvian woman who visited another inmate in 2010. They got married, but it turned out Jan was using her for his own purposes. He showed no signs of remorse or guilt for his actions. Meanwhile, in June 2011, David Holloway filed a petition in an Alabama court to have his daughter Natalee, who had gone missing in 2005, declared legally deceased. Natalee's mother opposed this, hoping that Jan would confess to the crime and face trial. After a hearing, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration on January 12, 2012. On June 8, 2023, Jan was extradited to the United States and placed in Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he pleaded not guilty. However, on October 18, 2023, he entered a plea agreement admitting to murdering Natalee Holloway. He confessed to fatally bludgeoning her with a cinder block on May 30, 2005, and disposing of her body in the ocean for sharks to consume. Unfortunately, the confession made as part of the plea deal could not be used in court. Jan was sentenced to 20 years, which would run concurrently with his prison term in Peru. Natalee Holloway's disappearance remains one of the most notorious missing person cases in the US, and it is still an open case in Aruba. A series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays effectively allowed the murder of an innocent young woman to go unpunished, despite global attention to the investigation.